Welcome to Lighten Up, the art of living clutter-free, a podcast where we tackle the literal and figurative clutter standing between you and your healthiest and happiest life. I'm Melanie, your host, coach, and guide on this journey to help you design a life that you love. Whether it's clearing out your kitchen cabinets, untangling your digital files, or letting go of the mental blocks that hold you back, we're here to make space for what truly matters. Let's lighten up together, starting now. So welcome back, everybody, to Lighten Up, the art of living clutter-free. I'm Melanie, your host and coach. This is the place where we help people get healthy, maybe lose some weight by removing the physical and mental clutter in their lives. And today I have a really awesome guest. I'm paying her back, or she's paying me back. I don't know which way. I have been on her podcast before, and we made a connection. We get along really well. We have some similarities in life, and I can't imagine anybody better being here right now. So let me just give you a little bit of detail. I have Jennifer Ginty with me. Jennifer is a single mom and entrepreneur who lives with complex PTSD and major depressive disorder from childhood trauma. Throughout her life, Jen has learned valuable coping skills and has made it her mission to help others to better understand their own emotions. Jen has faced obstacles on the healing journey, from being a mother without a healthy parental model of her own to overcoming her inner saboteur while coping with the symptoms of CPTSD and depression. She has spent the last 5 years developing My Moody Monster, a pull-apart plush toy that has helped children to get out their frustrations in a safe way and giving families a tool to talk about emotions and communication. Jen believes by sharing her story, and I believe too, she can help others to know they're not alone. Her YouTube channel features her Moody Talks, focusing on an emotion each month and teaching coping skills that have helped her with her own mental health. That's a lot. That is a lot. So thank you for being here today.
No, thank you for having me.
Of course. So one of the reasons I have started my podcast is to get my message out there that there is this thing called physical and mental clutter, and it gets in the way of living healthy lives. And my goal is to have everybody who comes on be experts in things that I am not an expert in, and make sure that the conversation somehow connects to clutter. So when you think of mental clutter, what do you think of?
I immediately go to trauma. I really believe that trauma is that mental clutter that holds us back, gives us a fear of moving forward in times, and being able to better understand ourselves. Especially during triggering times, trauma just takes up the brain. And when you have complex PTSD, your body chemistry has changed. The neurons in your brain have changed over time to keep you in these hyper-aware states. So that is the clutter, is that hyper part of complex PTSD, hypervigilance, all the different hypers that come with complex PTSD.
So tell me what you're willing to share about your trauma, what happened, and how you got to where you are now.
Sure. So I lived with my abuser, who was my father, for 14 years. And I also lived with my mother and my two older brothers. When I was 14, my older brother told a trusted adult what was happening in our lives, and my abuser was taken from the home. And I think a lot of people think that when an abuser is taken away from a child, that the trauma ends there. But there are a lot of different micro traumas and other traumas that can come up afterwards. And for me, that was court trauma. I was brought into the court system. They wanted to put my abuser in prison, but they only wanted us, I think, as talking heads. They weren't really thinking much about our own mental health. It took me a while. I was only 14. My brothers were a bit older. It took me a while to admit to the things that had happened to me. And when I finally did, the people at the court were like, well, are you just saying that to go along with the rest of the rest of this? So they made me get in front of a grand jury and talk about all of this, to go in front of these people and talk about difficult things. And,
And this was happening when you were 14, 15 years old?
Yeah, it happened throughout my teens. It ended up going into my college life as well. So it was,
because I think about a kid that age, and There are things that are taboo to talk about or uncomfortable to talk about under the best of circumstances. And I would imagine that, again, this is just what I get from listening to people, that there's a lot of embarrassment and shame involved. And so you don't want to talk about it. And now you're forced to talk about it for good reasons, but still embarrassment, shame, trauma, trust issue, like the whole nine. And now you have to do that in front of people you don't know.
Exactly.
That must have been hard.
It was. It was really difficult. And it did bleed into my college years. And when I had to leave school and go to court, it was really difficult. By the end of it all, it was probably 4 or 5 years that we had to go through all of that trauma. And my abuser only got 4 years in prison. So that was yet another trauma that came with it.
Had your brothers been abused also, or just aware of your abuse?
They were also abused in the same ways. Yeah.
So 3 kids get abused and you get 4 years.
And
that's gotta be frustrating as the victim, thinking like, I did all of this work. I went through, all of these processes, and then that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And by the end of it all, when he finally went to prison, I was done. I did not want to deal with looking back at the trauma. All I kept saying was not yet. Not yet. I'm in college right now. I'm trying to be normal, quote normal. And then I just started a career. And then finally it was like, I have 2 little boys. How could I possibly take time from their, beautiful souls to work on myself, right? So it went on for years and years and years. And by the time that my brain had said to me right now was I had to close a boutique that I owned in town, and I had to go into bankruptcy. And it was like losing an identity. My brain fog set in, the exhaustion, the inability to communicate. Interpersonal communication was pretty much gone for me. And, at that point, I had to say, I need to put my team together and start working through this. And as a lifelong, people pleaser and caregiver, I even had to tell myself that I had to do this for my boys to start the whole thing going, right?
It's so interesting to me. I'm looking at my notes over here because I just started working on an outline for a future episode called Identity Drives Behavior. And in my head, really what I mean is identity drives whether you practice the behavior or not. And, so I know for me, like when I quit gymnastics, I didn't know who I was anymore because everyone identified me as a gymnast, whether it was my parents, or my grandparents, or my friends, or my coaches, or people who lived in my apartment building. It was because most of the time in the elevator, I was on my hands, seeing if I could stay on my hands while the elevator was moving.
Oh.
Now people who know me are like, yeah, I remember those days. And so it took me a really long time to figure out what my identity was. And that's because then your identity is mom, wife, employee, daughter, sister, whatever. We forget that like our identity is our name, right? My identity is Melanie, and your identity is however you identify yourself. So if I tell you I'm Melanie, I'm a strong woman, I'm a business owner, like all of those things. No one taught us how to do that. No. And in a case like yours, or in the verbal abuse that I got in the gym, we were really driven to not have an identity that's our own, that we own, as opposed to someone putting it on us. So I would imagine that you were able to be a business owner. Like there's a title in that, there's an identity in that. And then unfortunately going through bankruptcy again, challenged with identity. What was the breaking point for you? Like, when was it that you were like, enough is enough, I have to take care of me?
It was really that time when the brain fog set in. All that happened and my brain was just like, you can't move forward any longer. You have to do this or you're not going to be able to grow with your children or to, move forward and find something new that I would love to do. It just shut down.
What do your sons know about what happened to you?
They know about the abuse. They know about all those things. They don't know details of the abuse, but they know that
They don't need to.
right. They know that their grandfather is in prison for the rest of his life because after he came out, he went on to abuse other children. And this next time he was sent to prison, pretty much they gave him 50 years. And that was when he turned 70. So he's in it for life. So they know that their grandfather was not a good person and they understand what I've gone through. Even today, my son made some sort of comment about being in high school. And I was like, yeah, I don't know how I got through high school, I said to him. And he was like, yeah, I don't know how I can. And I said, well, I had to deal with this, like this
Right,
was
right,
what
right,
I
right.
dealt with. And he was like, yeah, right. He didn't really think about it, It was difficult for me. And I see how difficult it can be for my kids. And I just am so thankful that I could break cycles and give them the life that they deserve.
Under the best of circumstances, being a teenager is hard and quite frankly sucks sometimes. And that is under the best of circumstances. Add to it any kind of trauma. And, I'm sure there were days where you just didn't want to get out of bed. Well, under the best of circumstances, there are days teenagers don't want to get out of bed. And I want to be careful how I say that because I've been talking a lot lately about how I regret that there were things that I said or did when I was younger, or regret the narrative that I allowed to exist. And I feel that way about the terrible twos and teenagers. Now, first of all, my kids didn't do the terrible twos. It happened like at 3 with them for whatever reason. But again, I thought there was something wrong because we were taught to believe that the twos are terrible and yada, 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 and that teenagers are just so difficult. And I wish that I hadn't followed that narrative. I wish that, it was every age is amazing for what it is. There are some days, weeks, months, and years that are easier than others. But if your body is going through that many hormonal changes, then, and I say a lot of this as a woman in menopause right now.
Me too.
To people who are going through these things because your body is doing it, not your mind. And then add to it the way the mind feels. So I would imagine also for every time you add either a trauma or an issue or just like very mild depression or mild anxiety, add that and it makes those times that much harder.
Agreed.
How do you live a life where there isn't I would imagine there's a lot of mental clutter around being the victim. How do you live not being the victim?
I erased that idea a while back because I feel strongest when I am working on something that is my purpose. It's so important to me that I feel that my job is helping others and having a purpose in life. And that's why I ended up doing My Moody Monster. It came out of my own frustrations with my symptoms. And, I realized that I could share this with others since it was helping me.
So tell us about My Moody Monster.
Sure. I'll give you a little background on how that came about. So after, the whole brain fog, and I decided that I was going to put together my team and get myself on my healing journey, I first started, I got my individual therapist. And I'm going to say this, I've been saying this lately, and I think it's important for people, especially our age, to understand is I was introduced to my therapist and she's much younger than me. And at first I was like, what can she do for me? She's so young. She has no idea what, I've been through as a 40-something-year-old woman. And you know what? It was the best thing to ever happen to me because younger therapists, they've gone through training for different modalities that maybe the older therapists may not know about. And she introduced me to so many different therapies that could help me with my PTSD. And then I went inpatient. I decided, and I'd been inpatient when I was in high school, and I decided that that was going to be important for me because I needed to get everything together there. I needed to be in a safe space where I knew I was going to be taken care of and that I wasn't going to have to worry about self-harm or suicidal ideation. And I tell people that because I think it's really important. There's always this thought that inpatient means that you're weak or you're, quote, crazy. Right? And I am here to
Maybe it's
demystify this.
exactly the opposite. Like to me, it's absolutely the opposite. It would be so easy to ignore that there was a problem as opposed to go and fix it in the best methodology for you. Can I stop for a
Of
second?
course.
Because I so want to talk about the like younger therapist thing, because, again, like at just shy of 55, I am at the point where almost every single one of my doctors is younger than me. Almost every single one. And not by a lot in some cases, but I see all the time, they're the ones that were in medical school the most recently. So they're learning what's new. And not every physician out there is willing to consistently read medical journals and go to conferences where they would learn about what's new. I'm not saying that all doctors that way. I'm just saying that I think that the younger they are, the more willing to learn they are. So of course I want to go to these doctors that are going to know new things, or even I feel like some newer doctors are more likely to promote Eastern and Western medicine at the same time. One is not better than the other. They are both necessary. But if I'm only relying on Western medicine, I'm really not healing the mind, the body, and the soul in ways that worked for thousands of years. Like, we have to recognize it works. And so I love that you say that about therapy, because at the end of the day, it's nice when someone has gone through what we've gone through, but really we just need someone who's empathetic. Someone who's going to be a really good, like, let you talk and then only give feedback when asked for it or when absolutely necessary. That's a lot. So when you say younger, how much younger do you mean?
I think she's in her 30s. I'd say probably about 15 years younger. And I love her so much. She's got tattoos all over her body. She's just very cool person.
I love that.
Exactly. I love my therapist. And she's wonderful. And the other thing, going to the Eastern medicine thing, acupuncture is my friend, especially when it comes to symptoms and depression and anxiety. So I highly recommend people look at the other side of medicine. It's important for us to try what works for us. Not everything's going to work for every single person, but it's going to work for someone because it has been working for others.
Or just the willingness to try, to not just make an assumption. I hate like when people say things are woo-woo. I'm going to, for a moment, allow that to be a thing, because it seems to come up a lot in the guests I've had, but I think it's because the guests that I've had so far have been people who are willing to try and talk about things that other people were not doing. And like, I have hippie parents who introduced me to a lot of other kind of methodologies. And, like my father brought in a Reiki healer when I broke my foot, that the one injury that was like the ending injury for my gymnastics career, I healed really quickly. The orthopedic surgeon was like, whoa. And when my father said it was the Reiki healer, at that time in the 80s, the orthopedic surgeon was like, I just think your daughter's a fast healer.
Oh, okay. Dismissive, right? Totally dismissive.
Whatever. Yeah. Whatever it's worth. But I mean, I would imagine, I find it so helpful to do things like meditate and go to yoga. I really love a very good sound bath. For me, the sound bath is like the best way to extricate all of the mental clutter from my head. I know it's not for everybody, but what I have to say is that for someone who lives a high level of anxiety and very like strong ADD, I need something that's going to go, just going to like allow me to breathe and come down without judgment. And there's so much judgment out there. Okay, so tell me more. What are other things that you do for you and for your mental health?
Yeah, so the inpatient really helped me to reset, get to where I needed to be. And in that, I discovered that I didn't hate group therapy anymore. When I was a kid, forced into group therapy, I was like, what the hell? Like nobody wants to be here. Nobody wants to talk about it. We just want to be teenagers, right? But as an adult, I realized that it's a community. There are people who understand what I'm going through or what I've been through and are doing their own healing. And that understanding, that personalization of it for all of the people involved in group therapy was amazing and is amazing. And that's where I came up with the concept for My Moody Monster. I was in a group therapy session and I said, I wish I had a monster that I could rip apart and throw across the room and burn on fire and just take everything out on. And people in the group were like, yeah, you should have that. And I was like, okay. So I went home, and I'm not a seamstress. I'm not a tailor in any way, shape, or form. But I put together this, ragtag, plush doll, plush monster, and I made their arms and legs and head of Velcro so that I could rip them apart. And I named them PTSD Pete. So that was the first Moody, was PTSD Pete. And so I realized using Pete was really helpful for me, that I was able to destroy that monster, but, and then put it back together again. And if it was helping me, it could help so many other people in this world, and especially children, because I used to always call my kids little cavemen, because they're born with all of this emotion and needs, and they don't know how to take care of themselves and control them or learn how to deal with them appropriately. And I was never taught how to deal with my emotions, right? I was always told, don't be an angry girl. I was scared into showing emotion. And, so many people, especially our generation, were told not to show our emotions. Don't make people uncomfortable with your emotion, right? So having Moody is a communication tool for adults to children, and especially for parents to children, because this gives them the opportunity to also sit back and say, okay, what do I need in this moment? Because our kids trigger us.
They can be grown-ups and still doing that. I hope my daughters are still listening, but I get that as much as we can be triggering to our kids, they can be triggering to us.
Yeah.
You are absolutely right.
Yeah. I have so many adults that tell me they use their kids' Moody's. And then I even have my trademark lawyer. She has one and she uses it. She says she uses it all the time in Zoom calls. All that underneath.
Is that like in lieu of like, I'm going to pinch my leg? Because if I pinch my leg, I can still smile without wanting to throw something.
I think so.
Good. I'm not alone. Okay. I need a My Moody Monster. But so how do you trust people? How do you trust men? How do you trust elders when you've been through what you've been through?
I'm working on it. It's part of my healing journey. It's very hard for me to trust, especially men at this point. I mean, after my breaking up with my husband, I had a few relationships that were not trustworthy at all. So, I'm kind of in this place where I need to learn to also trust myself more, because one of the things that happens with trauma is your intuition. You don't trust your intuition. And the reason for that, for me at least, was that I could trust my intuition all I wanted as a kid, but it didn't matter if my abuser was angry, or he came in just in a foul mood, or he just felt like he wanted to do something to us. Trust our instincts as much as we possibly could and our intuition, but it wasn't going to stop the abuse. So you kind of stop leaning on that intuition, and that's where that hyper arousal, that, hypervigilance comes in, and you learn to trust that more, or at least your body subconsciously trusts that more than your own intuition.
How does the not having felt protected when you were a kid, how does that affect your parenting in terms of, protecting your boys?
When I first had my first son, I got extremely angry at my abuser, because I'd be taking care of this infant, this little baby angel, and how could he possibly have hurt his children? So it was hard. I had a lot of anger at first, and I didn't have people who necessarily helped me to learn to be a parent when I was a child. I didn't get good parenting, so how am I supposed to know exactly what I should be doing? So I based it all off of, what would I have wanted when I was a child. And every day, to this day, my oldest son is turning 21 next week, and my youngest is 18. Every single day I tell them, whenever they leave to go to work or somewhere, I love you. Drive safely. Drive safely. I love you. Have a good night. Have a good afternoon, whatever it is, because I didn't get that. I didn't get the I love you. I don't think I got I love you for most of my life.
Mm.
And so I wanted to be sure that my children felt loved and had the attention that they needed and deserved.
Having not heard I love you a lot when you were a kid, how does that affect you, like believing someone when they say it?
I think it depends on the person, like past relationships. It depended on time, how long I was with the person to like truly believe and I love you. And then at times I just really didn't at all. I know my children love me. I know my family loves me. I have the most amazing friends that I know love me, and I can be happy in that. But there's still that mistrust of new
Right.
people, of men, and of just myself at times.
Is it like someone says, I love you? Do they really
Mm.
like the not believing it? I do think that it's important for us to be able to go with our gut instinct and to trust our gut instinct, even if we didn't have great gut instincts when we were younger, for what it's worth. I want to talk more about the concept of embarrassment and shame, because you and I both have talked about struggles with weight being a part of our teenhood, young adulthood, etc. Talk to me how you feel your trauma may have affected your weight.
I was heavy as a child, and my abuser always made it known if he saw a thin woman on the street, he would point her out and say, "You'll never look like that." He told me pretty much every day I was fat and ugly and no one would ever love me. My brothers called me Crisco fat in a can. Like yeah, like just weird things, and I always felt so obese. I felt like I was so much larger than everyone else. And I was a size 14. I was normal, basically normal size, but in the 80s and 90s, that's not normal to society. So I spent most of my life heavier, and then I had my kids, and I saw a picture of myself after my second son was born. I had to be in a wedding, and I saw the picture and I just started bawling my eyes out. And it was then that I made the promise to myself that I was going to be healthy. That, the weight definitely was a huge concern, but I also looked at myself as like, I just look unhealthy. I look like maybe I'll keel over from it, and maybe that's just my eyes as, looking at myself. Maybe other people didn't believe that, but that's what I believed, is that I was really big, I was unhealthy, and, embarrassment.
We spend so much time looking in the mirror. And, for those of us who don't like what we see in the mirror, we just assume that everybody else has that thought and those feelings about us. And I'm sure it had to hurt hearing your brothers say that to you. For sure they were doing it because that's what they heard your abuser do.
Yeah.
Right? Just like in carrying that on. The amount of mental clutter based on our weight, what we look like, what we think other people think. And at the end of the day, like, they're really not looking at me. They're looking at themselves in the mirror.
Well, it's society.
For those, right. And so for those of us who have spent a lot of time in our heads, the assumption is that like somehow everybody hears what's going on in my head. That's a whole different story. The norms and the weight, how did that change when you started taking better care of yourself, both, or most importantly, mentally? When you were taking better care of yourself mentally, how did that then affect your weight journey?
It was, I had people behind me. I was still married at that point. My husband was very much behind me in that he, joined me and all that. So I had that to start with. And I think it was just sheer, like, anger at myself for getting that way, being that heavy. Because at that point, it was right after my son was born, maybe like 3 months after, and I was a size 20. And I was really I was angry with myself that I had just let myself get there. And so it came as like pure, I'm going to do this. This is my mission. I am going to lose this weight, right? So
I am so familiar with that anger at myself for letting what happened happen, as opposed to now giving myself a little bit of grace and just recognizes, so that was a part of your journey. And the reality is, had I not been overweight, I wouldn't be doing what I am in this moment right now. Jen and I would not be having this conversation because I would have always been at a healthy weight and I would have been doing, what I had gone to school and planned on doing, which was very much associated with helping people. But for sure, if you had told me when I was over 200 pounds that I would be happy one day that I had been, I would have smacked that person. You don't know what you're talking about. This is the most painful thing in the world. Having experienced pain makes me better at helping people not experience pain, I think. It goes back to what you were saying about like a younger doctor. Do they really understand? I think it's very helpful when you work with someone who has experienced some of what you've experienced. My being able to guide people on weight loss, I hope that there's more validity in what I do because I have been there and experienced that. But it's not necessary to have had the exact same experience.
Truth.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So, you've dealt with a lot of mental clutter. So I like to ask this question of all my guests, and that is, so what is your clutter? Like if you have clutter right now, what is it? What does it look like? How does it affect
the
you?
mental clutter or the physical? Well, I think my mental clutter is limitations. Putting, having limitations on myself and how I can live, how I can thrive and heal. So I would say there's a bulk of limitations and sitting in that brain.
And when I talk about mental clutter, that's one of the first things I talk about is all the self-limiting beliefs, the things that we tell ourselves that aren't true and those kind of things. Do you have any kind of physical clutter?
I live in an apartment with 2 boys. I learned very quickly that I had to be strategic about the things that I kept in the house. I don't think I have that much clutter. And that is just from the years of learning that 2 boys need to be, I need to be on it all the time, making sure that this whole apartment isn't like we're swimming through shit, if I could say that.
You sure as hell can say that. I feel like there's a lot of people who would say, if it weren't for my kids, I wouldn't have any clutter. But the reality is everybody has their own like level of, clutter. I just think it's really important for people to hear that clutter doesn't have to be physical. And, and my supporting people on decluttering journeys doesn't mean getting rid of everything and being a minimalist. I think everything in the world has energy, everything, like our things, our thoughts, the people around us, our pets, our plants, etc. I do appreciate you have plants because I don't have a brown thumb. I have a black thumb. Like all I have to do, I swear I walk down the streets of New York City, I pass a floral shop and all the flowers go, oh, and that's okay. It's also okay because we have cats and we wouldn't be able to have plants in the house because of them. But I think that a lot of people think that they don't have clutter and then find out later they do, only because if everything has energy, not everything can have positive energy. So there are going to be things that have positive energy, keep them, hold them, enjoy them, love them. If things have negative energy, let it go, which can mean that some people who don't have what looks like a cluttered environment may own things that don't have great energy, and we shouldn't feel like it's necessary to hang on to those things for all the other reasons, like scarcity, like, but if I have to replace it, it'll cost me money, or it belonged to my grandmother, it's special, it's a collector's item, whatever, all of those things, whatever has made us believe we need to keep it when we don't like it, that's what's gotta go. And then I think we know, like, the physical clutter is one thing. It's the mental clutter that really is the most damaging, I guess. And what's most consistent person to person is, yes, there's a whole lot of shit up here. For those of you who are listening, my hand is all over my head. There's a lot of shit up here that needs to be let go. Right. Which is why we talked about things like yoga and meditation and sound baths and therapy, like just talking gets it out. Do you journal or write in any way?
I'm actually trying to put together a memoir. with all of my, my lived experiences and how I got through this. Actually, a friend of mine from high school, really, really good friend of mine, she's a literary agent, and she came to me one day. We went out for dinner, and she says, "You have a story, you have a book inside you, and you should
Sure.
definitely let that out." And I think that the work that I've been doing on that by like trying to figure out chapters, all the things that putting together the ideas has been very cathartic.
There's a lot of research that shows taking a thought and putting it on paper helps us like remove it from the brain, you know? And so if I had a really stressful day and I got angry and people upset me, like put it down on paper. It doesn't mean like it literally vacates the brain, but it can help in that process. One of the things that I love to do at the end of the year is to, like write down, all the things that made you angry, write it down and then take the paper, crumble it up, rip it up, throw it away, like let it go, then write in that moment the goals for the following year.
Oh.
And that may be the piece of paper you throw out at the end of the year. I don't know what I was thinking. These are stupid goals. Not like I didn't think that, like I was silly to think that I would be able to reach them and didn't, but rather I can't believe that on December 31st of last year, I thought that this was going to be important because we don't know all of the other things that are going to happen in the world and how those things happening in the world are going to affect our minds, our bodies, our souls. And there's so much going on in the world today. I don't care I do care where people stand, and I'm not going to get into it because it's not a political podcast. But if you want me to be on your political podcast, I have lots of thoughts.
Agreed.
I mean, for any of us that are dealing with like releasing hatred, kind of hard to do right now. Kind of hard to do when there are getting into
That's
it.
fine.
There are so many abusers that are out in the forefront and aren't being held responsible for the way they have abused people physically and mentally. If it makes me crazy, I can only imagine how it makes you feel.
My last week's podcast was a solo episode of me talking about how this administration is affecting people who are abused and have trauma. I did a short episode because I scripted it because I wanted to get everything said the way I wanted it to be said. So it was a pretty short, episode, but I talk about that a lot. It's really difficult. I said to my therapist one day, I said, "He's my abuser, my father." I said the name of my father. That is how it feels right now. And it's been really difficult for me to get past. I have to stop looking at the news. I have to stop doing that at times because I'm scared. The fear is coming out huge, I was told the other day, I saw posted that, they want to put people who are on antidepressants on wellness farms and to get them off it.
So I listen to so little news now that this is the first time I'm hearing that. And I just want to I want to punch a hole in the wall, which will not serve me very well. So I definitely need to go back and listen to that episode of your podcast. All of this is going to be in the show notes, but would you let everybody know both the name of your podcast and the name of that episode?
Sure. So let me pull up the exact name of it. But my podcast is When Not Yet Becomes Right Now, which is based on my own, discovery that other people have life journeys just like the healing journey that I'm on. And I really wanted to give that to people. So the exact name of the episode, so it's When Not Yet Becomes Right Now, and it's episode 21, Navigating Political Trauma and How We Build Community in Times of Fear.
Yes, I don't need to be writing it down, but I am because I need to listen to it. When I talk about all the different forms of mental clutter, I talk about everything, and it's like we said before, the self-limiting beliefs and the things we tell ourselves that aren't true. It's our calendar, it's social media, it's the 24-hour news cycle. Even if all of the news was good, having access to it 24/7 is not a healthy thing. And unfortunately, the news is very negative on many days of the week. And to not choose to ignore it is kind of choosing the upset and disappointment and fear. And let's be fair, we want to be well informed. The question is like, where does well informed then become an unhealthy amount of information?
Yes.
It's really hard.
Like I stopped mainstream media altogether. And basically, I use Blue Sky at this point as when I feel like I am okay to see what's going on. Because I want to know throughout
Sure.
the week what has been happening. But then it becomes overwhelming and it is a clutter in your brain because you're thinking of all these things that could happen, may happen to you.
I'd like to say that I predominantly get my news from NPR.
Mm.
I feel like the tone
Mm-hmm.
is easier for me, but I'd also like to say I got a lot of news from Jon Stewart and John Oliver.
Yeah, they're great.
Although they may make you laugh, but they're talking about all the things that make you angry also. I feel like there's not enough humor, there's not enough love, there's not enough of all of those good feelings, and somehow we need to create or recreate them for ourselves. Look at the direction we went into. But like I promise everybody, every episode we're going to talk about clutter in some way. And I like to say, like, with my ADD mind, we could be talking about squirrels and it would make perfect sense that the next topic be nuts, right? And then the next topic would be nut allergies. And then all of a sudden we're talking about airplane rides and people with nut allergies, which then gets us to start talking about, like, remember when you can smoke on the airplane? And we could do that in 30 seconds and it will make perfect sense to me, and someone else would be like they're just going around and around and around. They can't understand the process. And then add menopause to that, like now I just feel stupid most of the time. Right. Exactly. Okay. So tell me, what is like one really great takeaway that you would want the listeners today to hear?
I wish that I had chosen to start my healing journey earlier, honestly, like when my children were younger, so that I didn't have all of that fear and the, mistrust of myself and, not truly understanding my trauma. And my trauma can affect other people. You think that your trauma is insular, but it can affect everyone around you. So I wish that, I would say start your healing journey when you feel most ready to. And also, healing journeys are not linear. They're up and down, they're roller coasters, and you have to give yourself grace on those days where the roller coaster has hit the bottom. We live our lives that we always have to be busy, we always have to be doing something, but that's not true. We have to give ourselves the time to heal. And if that means you spend the morning with your head covered with your bed sheets, your bedclothes, if that's what you need to do in that moment, that's what you do. And it's not going to destroy the rest of your world when you give yourself grace.
I appreciate you saying that, because I think at the time in my life where my mental health was at its worst, I was taking lots of naps, very long naps. I was sleeping under the covers and covering myself up, hiding from like whatever the energy was outside of the blanket. And I don't think we give ourselves enough credit to be okay with those periods of time where you say, you know what, I am just going to shut down completely. Jennifer, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I think you said it's going to be in the show notes, but I think you said that you had a little discount for listeners today.
Yes. So if you would like a Moody of your own, you can use Pod 15, and that will give you 15% off your entire order. And the place to get yourself a Moody is mymoodymonster.com.
And that's all in the show notes. And everyone really, like, think about someone in your life who could use a Moody. How many of us, could really use a Moody? I think that would be a great addition to any family life for sure. So thank you again for being here. I will just let everybody know that Jen is a very special person, and I'm happy that you've listened all the way to the end. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Lighten Up, the Art of Living Clutter-Free. I hope you found a spark of inspiration to help declutter not just your space, but your mind and life as well. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little lightness in their life. Remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about progress. Small steps lead to big changes, and I'm here to help you every step of the way. For more tips, resources, and ways to connect, check out my website, follow me on social media, and don't forget to check out the Design Your Healthy Life Strategy program to take your transformation even further. Until next time, Keep letting go of what no longer serves you and making room for what truly lights you up.